BTL, coming at you. Good Tuesday, everybody. Welcome once again to BTL Bass Talk Live, where I'm going to talk bass fishing and anything else that I want to talk about. Yes, the chair is empty. The grasshopper, Matthew Pangrak, he is trying to catch some fish at Table Rock Lake with the Costa taking place this week. So I am flying solo today, but we've got a great show. We're going to have one of the guys on that surpassed the century mark at Lake Fork. Garrett Paquette's going to join us here just in a few minutes and talk a little bit about how the craziness went down at Lake Fork and all those fish caught over 5 pounds. Heck, even one caught over 11 pounds on Lake Fork. So we'll get into that here in a minute, but I want to kind of set up the week. Tomorrow, we're going to have the guy that got it done on the FLW Tour. John Cox is going to join us, and Bradley Hallman's going to be in studio tomorrow and on Thursday. Thursday, we will have on the man that won his first Major League Fishing piece of hardware. Dean Rojas is going to be on the show Thursday live via Skype. And as I mentioned before, we're going to have Bradley in studio on Thursday also. So a crazy week. The second time this year that we had the triple dip taking place, where we had Major League Fishing, the FLW Tour, and the Bassmaster Elite Series all taking place at the same time. And some of you might be wondering, well, Mark, how come you didn't get Brandon Cobb on, the guy that won at Lake Fork? Well, here's the deal. Brandon is actually on an airplane right now. So we couldn't work out the scheduling, and I thought, man, what a great opportunity to get Garrett on to talk about his week that he had at Lake Fork. So we'll try to get Brandon on. We had Brandon on before when he won his first Blue Trophy. So we'll try and get him on here in the future. Next week, they're at Fort Gibson, and I know, folks, I know a lot of people out there that are not familiar with this body of water might think, if they look and they hear and they see what everybody's talking about on Lake Fort Gibson, it's up a little bit. Yeah, it's up almost 15, 16 feet. Who cares? All right, the one thing that many people don't realize about this lake, it's a holding tank. All the water that's coming out of Grand Lake flows into Fort Gibson, and they hold the water there until they can release it into the Arkansas River. So no panic, no panic. All right, if it's 15 feet up, I think if it's all the way to 20 feet up, they're still going to be able to have the tournament. Yeah, it might be a little challenging, but let me tell you something, folks. When that water gets up in the picnic tables and the bathrooms and the buildings and everything else, they're going to catch them, all right, especially this time of the year. So a lot of areas will come into play on Fort Gibson Lake that just don't come into play except during the springtime or late spring, when we have these just crazy amounts of rain that just come in waves here in Oklahoma. And just about every lake in Oklahoma right now is blown out. Fortunately, as I mentioned, Fort Gibson is one of those lakes that you can fish when it's 15, 16, 17, 18 feet up. All right, I think they're going to catch them. I think it's going to be really cool. Now, on the flip side, here in, not this week, obviously, but next week, Major League Fishing, the BPT is going to be on Table Rock, and I really, really believe, we know that Matt's there, and when Matt gets back, he can talk about it, but I really think that that is going to be an event where we're finally going to see the 100-pound mark surpassed in one single round. Could be wrong. I mean, they may back off on him. I think they could have had 100 pounds today, maybe caught 60, 70 fish for 100 pounds or 120 pounds or whatever it was. But a lot of the strategy that is involved in the Major League Fishing game is saving fish. And we'll get into that a little bit on Thursday when we have Dean Rojas on. So let's do this. Let's take a break, and we're going to come back with Garrett Paquette live via Skype. I believe he is somewhere in Mississippi. I could be wrong. But he is actually headed back to, I think he's going to Alabama, and then he's going to come back to Oklahoma. So we'll find out what he has going on right here on a Tuesday. And hopefully you guys didn't get mad at me because I didn't have a show on Monday, but who wanted to have a show and go up against what went down at Lake Fork? Are you kidding me? I mean, the first 2 hours of that live stream were insane. yesterday, Monday. I know people might have gotten fired yesterday because of all the time that they spent at work watching what was going down at Lake Fork. Unbelievable. So let's do this. I'm flying solo. Let's take a break, and we're going to come back with Garrett live via Skype. Everybody stay tuned on a Tuesday.
Sleek new design with easy control file. The clearest images underwater with uncompromising range. Live mapping from the touchscreen. View notifications, video, even Google Maps on screen. And for the first time ever, real-time view of fish movements with live sight sonar. HDS Live. New from Lowrance.
I got my power pole down, stuck in the mud in the bottom of the lake, sitting so still in the wind and the waves, could even be a hurricane. I got my power pole down.
AFCO has a new foul weather rain suit called the Hydronaut. A lot of the features that I really like about it first is the speed vent hood. If it's raining out, you know how a person gets wet is when you run down the lake and the hood comes down. With the speed vent hood, it's going to stay up. It has a camera mount in the pocket on the chest. The Hydronaut has a 2-layer, 100% waterproof nylon shell. If you're interested in a rain suit that has a lot of cool features that's going to keep you dry, you need to check out the Hydronaut from AFCO.
Aaron Martins here. I'm going to be telling you about a new product by Sunline. It's Siglon PE x8. I've been using it almost extensively all year for my frogging, flipping, drop shotting, shaky heading, worming, jerk baiting. It's by far my favorite Sunline braid. I honestly, I don't say this unless I think it's true, but honestly it's the best braid in the market of any of the braids. Definitely check it out. It's a price point line, $14.95 for 165 yards, and that could last you a whole year, just one spool with using leader material. It's Siglon PE x8. It's my favorite braid, and I think if you use it, it'll be your favorite braid too.
Pros depend on hydraulic jack plates to get the best out of their boats. Do what they do. Demand Atlas performance. Atlas gets you from the bottom to the top in less than 8 seconds, even with the big 4-strokes. And when you gotta turn right around and get that heavy load back up in rough water, Atlas's innovative design and American-made components will get you there with confidence.
I'm at Depot. Just look for yourself. There's an Atlas jack plate on just about every professional's boat.
The Atlas hydraulic jack plate. You can depend on it.
All right, we are back on a Tuesday, kicking off the week without Matthew. Talk to him a little bit. He's catching him a little bit up there. I think everybody else is too, though. All right, a couple housekeeping items real quick, and then we will go to our guest who is waiting patiently. This past weekend, I went through about 150 emails, and folks, I apologize for not getting back to you sooner, but I have several emails right here that when Bradley Hallman's in studio, we're going to touch on some of the feedback that we've received from the viewers and the listeners out there. So greatly appreciate all your comments, and we're definitely going to get to some of those. The other thing real quick, our next edition, the debut of our next 20 Feet Deep documentary is going to take place on May 20th. And a couple of people have seen it, and they really thought that it was a really good inside look at the 49th Bassmaster Classic. It's called 49th, and it's kind of the behind-the-scenes stuff on some of the things that went down during Ott Defoe's victory in Knoxville. So look forward to that. As I mentioned, that's coming out on May 20th. All right, so let's finally, and I apologize, let's finally bring in our guest here. Let's see. Garrett, you there, man?
I'm here. Thank you for having me.
No, man, thanks for taking time out. Let me get the shot queued up. I'm flying solo today, so it makes it a little bit more difficult with Matthew not here. All right, there you are, man. Greatly appreciate you being on live via Skype. And, man, what a week at Lake Fork, dude.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable. I mean, I'm from Michigan, and I feel like, you know, we might have the best fisheries in the world around there, but we do not have the bass like that. I've never seen that many 6 to 10 pound bass in a lake, and to go down there and, you know, get to experience it was just incredible.
All right, let's kind of start out. Was this your first real experience with Lake Fork? I mean, have you even been down there?
Yeah. No, I've never even been to Texas, so that was my first trip to Texas right there.
Wow, pretty impressed. They do everything big in Texas, right?
They do, man. They take care of their fisheries. They manage it. You know, all the locals are fired up about it. It was a neat experience.
All right, well, this is kind of cool because a lot of the listeners and a lot of the people watching, how did you break down Lake Fork, and what was your game plan going into it?
Yeah, you know, I researched it like I do any lake, and from what I saw, it looks like we were going to have fish in all 3 stages of the spawn. You know, some pre-spawn fish, definitely some spawning fish, some fish that were still shallow after the spawn on a shad spawn, and then some offshore fish. So in that regard, it was a little bit tricky because you only get 2.5 days on the Elite Series to practice a body of water. And it's like, how do you want to split up your time between each? But I really spent the mornings trying to find that shad spawn deal, like how Brandon Cobb did or Micah Frazier, all that activity on the topwater you were talking about in the first 2 hours, and I never really ran into it, unfortunately. But my strengths are to fish offshore, you know, using my Humminbird electronics, idle around, try to find groups of fish. And finally, near the end of practice, I started getting, you know, dialed into what I was looking for. Actually, Chad Pipkins, who I room with, he kind of helped me out on it. He got on it first, and he threw me a little bit of a bone, so I was able to run with that a little bit, get a little bit going, and then as the tournament progressed, I kept expanding and finding new areas and just trying to catch them as I could.
Wow. So did you have a good practice?
No, it was actually pretty slow. Like the first 2 days, I was really worried. And then on the final day, we had some stable weather finally. Like they had a bunch of rain down there, and it finally stabilized. And some fish really got onto the beds. And I actually thought I was going to fish shallow. Like I went around and there were 4 and 5 pounders everywhere. And late with like 40 minutes left to practice, I finally found one group of offshore fish. And it kind of keyed me into that this is something that I might need to be doing because obviously the fish are going to be moving into these areas as the days go on. So I had that in my back pocket, and I knew that during the tournament, it was something I was going to need to keep looking for.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the crankbait. The crankbait that you were using. I watched a ton of live, and I saw so many guys, which is a typical thing down on Lake Fork this time of the year. But how cool was it catching all those fish on a crankbait?
Yeah, it was awesome. I mean, it's just something we don't get to do back home. Our lakes have a ton of grass in them. We don't have a lot of hard bottom like that, so you can't just dredge that crankbait as fast as you can into the bottom. And I was throwing a bait, a Strike King 8XD. It's not a sponsor of mine. It's one I like. It's got a big, wide wobble to it, which when the fish are feeding on gizzard shad like they were, that's a real big key. It kind of puts off the same vibration as a gizzard shad, and it runs really true at a high speed. Whereas a lot of them, they'll spin out and they won't track straight. And if your crankbait wasn't tracking straight this week with all the logs and standing trees, you'd almost get hung every single cast because your crankbait would just go off to the side until it ran into something and hung up.
So some of the entertaining items of watching this stuff at Lake Fork was watching you guys try and land some of these big fish, especially with the crankbaits. What are your thoughts on how stressful it was once you got hooked up to get the thing in the boat?
Yeah, it always is with a treble hooked bait, and when you're dealing with fish that size. Like, I think I caught 8 of my 10 biggest fish that I've ever caught this week. So, I'm not someone that's used to catching 6 and 7 pounders all the time. So it was really stressful. But for me, I just try to stay calm, play them out. I didn't want to rush them to the boat because that's when they usually come off, is when you bring them in real fast and they're starting to jump and going crazy next to the boat. So I just took my time, let them wear themselves out, and then usually by the end of the fight, they just kind of slid into your hands and you'd bring them in.
Dude, you're having a great year. I went back and I looked at your stats. I think your earnings this year have surpassed the 70,000 mark so far. But also when I went back and I looked how you got started, at least from the bass perspective on this, your first event was back in 2012 on the Detroit River. And with you being up north, do you remember that first event 7 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was a co-angler for that one. That's actually the only tournament I've co-anglered, I believe. But yeah, that was my first taste of the opens, and just being around my heroes, seeing like Ike Anelli and Chad Pipkins. That was actually the year he qualified. Just getting a little bit of taste of that really fueled my fire and made me want to try to do this myself.
All right. I think 4 years after that is when you decided to make the move and actually do your first set of opens in 2016. What did you do?
That's right, yeah.
What did you do in between that first time that you fished as a co-angler that got you to the point to say, you know what, I'm going to make this move? I mean, what went down in Michigan? What drove you to do that?
Yeah, I think when I fished that first one, I might have been like 16 or 17. So definitely school was still in the way. I was still in high school. But I wanted to make sure that I was prepared. We don't have a ton of fisheries where you're ready to necessarily compete on a lake like Lake Fork or some of these southern reservoirs, but we do have some. So I just tried to get as much experience as I could with fishing largemouth around the house until I felt like I was consistently doing well at a local level. And once I did that, I started branching onto some regional tournaments. I traveled like down to Ohio for a few, or some of the neighboring states. And once I felt like I had a decent grasp on the region, the Great Lakes region, I put my money up and went to the opens.
Do you remember that first open?
Oh yeah, I was as nervous as could be.
All right, were you more nervous then or compared to your first Elite Series event?
First open, for sure, because I was still really, I'm still fairly young, but I was really young, and you forget about the simple things, the process. You go into these tournaments and you feel like you have to do something special to do well. And in reality, it's the same as if you're fishing a Tuesday night tournament. I mean, it's a 5-fish limit, and that's just the reality of it. The competition level could be different, but the process never changes. You're going out and you're doing what you've been doing, and you just kind of have to keep that mindset no matter who you're fishing against. All
right, one more question, then I want to go back to Lake Fork. This year at the St. Johns River, really the only event that you've really struggled in. What was your experience with tidal waters? Was that an issue?
I wouldn't say tidal was. I don't have a ton of experience, but I love the James River. It's probably my favorite fishery, and that's a tidal river. It was more so the Florida experience is what got me. I actually found a lot of those 30-pound bags that those guys weighed in. I found those fish early on in practice when everyone was struggling. Guys were coming in saying they've caught 1 12-incher and how tough it was, and it's going to be a terrible tournament. And I was out there catching 4 to 9 pounders, or at least shaking them off. So I was really excited for that one. And as the week went on and it got into the 80s and all those fish moved to the bank, I just never moved with them. I stayed on the outside fishing for fish that had left. And I'm just not used to seeing, a wave of fish move like that. Usually they move in, they have a couple different waves. But in Florida, when it's time to go, every single fish in the lake seems to go up shallow. And if you're not there, you're in trouble.
All right. Back to fork. What was special about some of the areas that you had your flurries in with the crankbait?
Yeah, they were all little hard spots in creeks. They were post spawn and pre spawn fish around spawning pockets, and it was really a timing deal for me. I know if you watch live, you probably saw it. I don't think I weighed in, a 6-pounder before 2 o'clock, and I think I weighed in 8 of them. So it really took the whole day for these spots to load up. But when they were just little feeding stations. I don't know what the fish did in the morning. Obviously, they were biting top water on clay points, some of them. But, they were just – these fish they were getting ready to go to the main lake, and they were just little, stopping points for them for a day or two before they kept moving onto the main river for their summertime areas. So I just kind of intercepted them as they were going, and each day – It changed a little bit. You'd have to refine them, but you just kind of follow them out of the creek. And when you find them, it was just so crucial to catch as much as you can as fast as you could.
What pound test line are you using on that crankbait?
On that crankbait, I was throwing 14-pound Sunline Sniper, which is, usually I'd crank with 10 to 12. I think most people do it with a deep crankbait, but I was only throwing that bait in 10 to 12 foot, so I didn't need it to run like 20 foot, like how that bait is designed to run. And down there was so much wood, and the size of the fish we were catching were so big that I wanted to upsize a little bit just to give myself more of a chance to land them.
I know you mentioned hard spots, and I know that those fish down there get into a seasonal pattern where when you bounce that crankbait off of a stump or a piece of wood or something like that is deeper, that's usually when the bite happens. Did you experience that at all?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there was some stumps scattered in there. I mean, my whole thing was I was literally cranking the bait so fast that I couldn't even – I mean, the bites, hitting bottom, hitting a stump, it all felt the same to me. So I know that it was definitely a complete reaction bite. I mean, you just had to get that bait in there and dig, whatever was in the way, just try to hit it as hard and as fast as you could. And then the rod would just load up and it would be a big one. It was amazing. Wow.
So what gear ratio were you using on your reel? Because everybody was doing that.
Yeah, I was throwing a 6.3 to 1. Just nothing too slow. Just a mid-range ratio. Like you can throw a 7 or an 8. Some guys do it, but the higher you go, I mean, the more tiring it is. So I just stayed with a 6, and that seemed to work all right.
All right, Rusty on the instant feedback wants to know: were these bass actively feeding in wolf packs?
Yeah, I mean, schools of fish. You would go over, like the best spot I found, the one at the end of practice, I probably saw 30 of them down there.
Wow.
So it was definitely a good school of fish. But generally when I would go over them, I'd see, 8 to 10 of them. And if you could get 4 of those to bite, that was a productive stop, I would say.
Now, we asked several guys on this show, especially with crankbaits, are you throwing it right out of the box, or did you make any modifications to it?
I changed the hooks. I upsized the hooks, or I went to a sharper hook. I don't like stock hooks on anything in tournament situations, no matter the bait. I mean, some companies provide awesome hooks, but I have a few that I really like. And then, with how fast I was reeling it and how hard I was hitting the bottom, I would have to tune the baits every now and then, just because you'd hit it and it'd knock it off to the side. And like I said, if it wasn't running straight, you were getting snagged the whole time. So I would tune it a bit, which is generally you wouldn't have to do that. And that's not a knock on, Strike King for making that bait. That's just simply me using it for how it's not meant to be used.
Yeah. Typically, though, you didn't have to do a lot of tinkering, especially bouncing that thing off of everything that was in its way. It was like a collision course on the path to a 5 or a 6 pounder.
Yeah, it was. It was They held up well. Like, I don't think I broke any baits. It was just a little bit of tuning here and there, and like I said, I would change the hooks.
That's crazy. All right, now I want to know, and for those people that watch this show and listen, they know that I'm a topwater nut. You just didn't find it? I know a lot of the guys really got off to a great start throwing the topwater. What was the scoop with you?
I didn't find it. You know, I'm not scared to admit it. I knew that that was going to be a deal, and I spent a lot of my practice doing it. The thing with Lake Fork is, even though it's not a huge lake, there's thousands of places that set up like how those guys were fishing, and if you run the wrong 100 of them in practice, it's that easy to miss it. So I just never. I mean, I threw those big topwaters. I jerk baited those points and those shell beds, and I just, you know, I don't know if it was bad luck or bad timing, but I never ran into it.
All right, now be honest with me, man. You are a professional. You're on the Elite Series. The first time that you launched the boat on Lake Fork, and I know you've talked to people, and you mentioned Chad Pipkins and all that, but seriously, was it not just a little intimidating the first time that you pulled into one of those pockets and you saw that timber and you just thought, holy moly, what is going on? Yeah,
it is. It's a bad place if you want to keep your boat in great shape. Let's put it that way. I mean, there's so much wood in the water, and there's just, you know, you're idling. I mean, you can only run so far, and they have a boat lanes map card now, which is nice, and that really cut my learning curve down. So it showed me a lot of the trails you can take in and out, but a lot of these trails don't run, you know, way back into the creek, so you have to idle ways. And man, when you're idling, it's just nonstop. Your boat's bouncing off things, and you're smashing your lower unit. It was intimidating. That's not something that I'm used to.
You know, 15, 20 years ago, during what a lot of people say the heyday of Lake Fork, a lot of the locals would put Clorox bottles and Coke cans and different things on a lot of the trees to identify, okay, you need to go this way. That's how they kind of marked a lot of those lanes before we had the technology that's available today. And then also you would have some gamemanship where people would actually throw out decoys. And believe me, it happened to me, where you would believe the Clorox bottle and somebody just threw a Clorox bottle out there to take you off the beaten path. So
that's funny. I was thinking they have a bunch of buoys out there where you can run. I was thinking, man, how evil would I be if I took one of these and drug it 100 foot to the right?
Believe me.
And just sat back and watched.
Dude, back in the day, stuff like that definitely happened. All right, a number of people, including Mike in New York, want to know your thoughts on looking forward to the Northern Swing. What are your thoughts?
I'm excited. I mean, I was excited for every tournament. I've never been to any of these lakes, but, you know, obviously growing up in Michigan, I have a decent understanding of how, like, the New York lakes will set up, and I'm really excited for Gunnersville. That's going to be similar to how I was fishing here, you know, fishing offshore ledges. So I think, like how you talked about Fort Gibson earlier being so high, that's the next or that's the most concerning event for me. Is if I can get by that one, I think I'll be in a good position to end this year strong.
Yeah. You ever fished any of the lakes in Oklahoma?
No, never.
It's too bad that the taste that you're going to get is going to be on one that's going to be massively blown out. But
yeah, it's still going to be fun.
Yeah, dude. Just like I said to open the show, that is one body of water in this state and really in the region that it's a holding pool, and people freak out when they see the lake level, but that's just the way it is, and you'll see when you get there. All right, I'm curious. I want to go back to Lake Fork once again. The water clarity. There was so much rain that had went through the area, and so many times. Typically, that lake is fairly clear, and the reaction that you were getting from the crankbait bumping off logs in the bottom and all that and everything, how important was water clarity with all of the rain that you guys got?
It was like most of the better areas seemed to be at the dam, which had the cleanest water. Like if you went up the river, you'd be lucky to probably see 6-8 inches into the water. So I definitely stayed, you know, more near the clearer water at the dam. Just one, because they can see the bait, and two, when the water is real stained, they have no reason to get out deep. And I think that's why a lot of the fish, you know, like how Keith Combs won fishing 15 to 25 foot. I think that's why that bite never happened, because it was still stained down there slightly. I think it just held them in the 10 to 12 foot zone instead of really pushing them out where they should have been. All
right. Cool stuff, man. Well, like I said, you're off to just a tremendous start, and we're five events into it, right?
Yep, 5 events.
And Geez, just an outstanding effort so far this season. What's been the biggest surprise for you so far, 5 events into it?
Just, I mean, I hate to say this, but just how good the guys are. You know, we all when the, you know, obviously the Bass Pro Tour formed, there was a lot of talk about all the elites will never be what it used to be and all this, and that kind of gets in your head and you're like, man, well, maybe they're right. You know, maybe this group of anglers isn't going to be as good. But if you look at the weights, if anything, they've stayed the same or gone up from what they generally are. So these guys, it's man, it's still a really tough field of guys, and if you're going to do well, I mean, you absolutely have to be on your A game.
All right, man. Well, I'm going to come see you guys at Oklahoma. I'm looking forward to the Fort Gibson event. And you're headed to Guntersville, right, this week?
I am. Yep. I got a couple hours into the drive. You said Mississippi. I think I'm in Texarkana, which I'm guessing is by Texas and Arkansas.
Good guess.
So I think I got another 8 hours. I'm going to go to Guntersville for a few days, look around, do a little pre-practice for our event there, and then drive on back to Oklahoma.
All right, very cool, man. Well, I greatly appreciate you taking time out. Just a tremendous week
for having me
at Lake Fork, and looking forward to seeing you when you guys come to the holding tank of Fort Gibson.
I can't wait. Thank you for having me. Thanks, guys.
All right, man. There you have it. The man that surpassed the century mark at Lake Fork, Garrett Paquette. Take care, man. Be careful.
Thank you.
All right, that's going to – let's see here. Once again, I'm flying solo. So there we go. That's going to kind of wrap things up. We're going to be back tomorrow with Bradley Hallman in studio. As I mentioned, we'll have John Cox on. And then on Thursday, we're going to have Dean Rojas on, talk about his victory at Smith Lake. So great, great, great stuff. That is the last triple dip that we will have during the season. So we do have a couple of times where we have multiple events taking place. 2, but no more triple dipping. Anyway, good stuff. Tomorrow, 8:30 a.m. Central Time, same time, and we will be back with Bradley Hallman and John Cox tomorrow. Keep sending me the emails, folks. Great, great stuff. Where's it at? Right here. And I got 5 pages right here that I want to touch on tomorrow. And the insight that you guys bring is tremendous. Some of the stuff I never really think about, and it's really, really cool to get an insight from the fans that are out there with some of the stuff that's taking place. All right, I got to cue that up once again, flying solo. So we're going to take a little bit of time tomorrow morning. Got a little surprise for you. All right, only about 5-10 minutes with Bradley here in studio. So make sure you come back. Join us tomorrow, same time. Remember, if you're listening to us on iTunes, make sure that you give us a rating and do a review. That helps us immensely. All right, everybody, be safe. We will talk to you tomorrow right here with John Cox and Bradley Hallman. Everybody, stay tuned. I'm out of here.